Hi everyone. So in this part of the video, we are going to be learning a topic called list comprehension. Now, what is list comprehension? Basically, list comprehension means creating a list using loops, but instead of multiple statements, creating it in a single statement, so making it compact. Now, another question that arises is, how is this related to data structures? In fact, if you ask me, list comprehension is just a feature of the list data type of Python. So it has no direct connection to data structure. It could have also been dealt in the list chapter of class 11. Okay, but your syllabus has introduced it in class 12. So we are going to look at the concept of list comprehension here. Okay, so we're just going to create lists, but making it shorter. In a single statement, we can create lists that could have conditions, that could have loops, and so on. You'll understand as we go through few examples that I'm planning to show you. Is that clear? So are you ready? Okay, so let's get ahead and see the first example. Okay, I want to create a list that contains the squares of all the numbers from 1 to 10. Okay, so first I would show you what would you do if you did not know the concept of list comprehension and you were using loops. You would be writing something like this. So here I have a list named, let me just take my pen. Okay, I have a list named as S, an empty list. Now what am I doing? I'm writing a for loop that ranges from 1 to 11. 1 to 11 means I'm going from numbers 1 to 10. And what's happening? X picks up all these values from 1 to 10. And what am I storing in the list? How do I add something into a list? We know by a method called append. So I'm saying append x star star 2, which means x raised to 2. That's what we want, square of the numbers. So initially what is x? 1, so 1 square is added to the list. Next time in the loop x becomes 2, to 2 square is added in the list, and so on up to 10 square. Okay, so this is how we would be doing this particular question. But if we were using loops, if we are using the concept of list comprehension, all this could be done in a single statement, as I show you here. So now let me just explain to you the different parts of a list comprehension. Now this is the evaluation or the value that will be actually stored in the list. So what are you planning to store in S? X raised to 2. That's what you're doing even here. S dot append x raised to 2. So the value of x raised to 2 is what you plan to store in the list. Now, but what is the value of x? The value of x ranges from 1 to 11. 1 to 11 means, like the previous case with the for loop, it goes from 1 to 10. So what happens is, what does this line exactly mean? Now this is your expression. This is your expression which is going to be evaluated, and that evaluated value is going to be stored in the list called S. So x raised to 2 is what I want to store in the list. But what is x? That is given to you by this loop, which ranges from 1 to 10. So it's exactly similar to using a loop, but there you saw I made use of 3 statements. Here I'm making use of a single statement, and that's why I say it's compact. Okay, so this is how I could do the same program using a loop or a list comprehension method. So what would, if I ever print S in both the scenarios, what would S be? 1 square, which is 1, 2 square, which is 4, 3 square, which is 9, and 10 square, up to 10 square, which is 100. Is that clear? Okay, let me just give you another example also. Probably something that has a condition. Okay, now we have to create a list that contains the squares of all even numbers. So there is a condition here. It's not just squares of all numbers, but squares of even number. So if I had a loop, how would it be? Same, I create an empty list. The x loop is the same. Only thing is I'm putting up a condition here that if x modulus 2 equals 0. Now some may ask me, ma'am, couldn't we just write 2 comma 11 comma 2? So it starts at 2, it skips by 2. Yes, you could do that, but I just wanted to introduce the if and tell you how would you do it with list comprehension concept. Okay, and I am storing the value of x raised to 2. This was if I was using a regular loop, but if I'm going to be using the list comprehension method, I told you this is what is being evaluated. So x raised to 2 is what you're going to store in a list called M. But what is the value of x? X ranges from 1 to 11. Okay, if I had stopped here, it would be like my previous example where it would be 1 square, 2 square, 3 square. But if you have a condition, then you just write the condition after the for statement. Now I want to tell you, please make a note of this square bracket here and this square bracket here. That's the feature of the list comprehension. You write the name of the list is equal to a square bracket, and within the square bracket you write an expression along with a loop, or you write an expression with a loop and a condition, and so on. Okay, so the 4 lines here got replaced by a single line by using the concept of list comprehension. Okay, and that's going to be obviously your output. You'll just get 2 square and 4 square and 6 square and so on. Okay, so now from the next example onwards, I would be not showing you the loop. Now you understood from a loop how do you convert it to your list comprehension method. We'll just be talking about the list comprehension method. Okay, now I say to create a list of numbers from 1 to 100, okay, which are divisible by 2 and 5. So there are 2 conditions, that the number has to be divisible by 2 as well as divisible by 5. But am I squaring the number or doing anything with the number? No, I'm just storing the number as it is. Okay, so then it makes it easier. I'm storing y. That's the expression here. So in this example, the expression is just y. I'm storing the number y as it is. And what is the value? What is the y's range? It ranges from 1 to 101. Okay. Is there a condition? Yes, it says it should be divisible by 2 and 5. I told you if you have a condition, just write it next to the 4. So I wrote 2 conditions here. Y modulus 2 equals 0. Y modulus 5 equals 0. I mean, if y modulus 2 equals 0 and if y modulus 5 equals 0. What you could have done is also, you could have eliminated this if and just made use of the AND operator that we have learned. Even that way it would have worked. Is that clear? So this is the evaluated value that is going to be stored in the list for this range and for this condition. Okay, let's look at, now this was just having a condition like a if. What if you have a if this is the case, do this, otherwise do this, the if else concept? Then in that scenario, okay, the output for this would definitely look like this. Then in that scenario, I'm going to show you an example 4. It says, create a list of numbers that stores 2 times the number if the number is even. Otherwise, you store the number itself. So that means you'll have to check whether it's even or whether it's odd. And the range is from 0 to 9. So what do? Just pay attention here. When you have a if else concept, the condition is not written after the for, the condition is going to be written before the for. I repeat, right after the expression. You have to note this. If it was only a condition, the condition is written after the for. But if it's a if else kind of a condition, then that condition, the if and the else part, is written before the for, but slightly different from how we normally write if else. Normally when we write if else, we write if, the statement to be done if it's true, else, and the statement to be done if it's false. But that's not the case here, because we know that the square bracket must begin with an evaluation here. So what does this mean? Y multiplied by 2. Y is going to be multiplied by 2. When should it be 2 times? When the number is even. If y is divisible by 2. Okay. Otherwise, what are you just storing? So this is your one expression and this is your other expression. So how is this going to be read by the interpreter? That store the value y into 2 if y is divisible by 0. Otherwise, store the value y. And what is the range for y? Range for y, I've written range 10. Range 10 would mean what? Any value that is between 0 and 9. So this you need to make a note. Many people make a mistake by writing the if else at the end. No. If it has a if and a else kind of a condition, that has to be written before. And then remember, it won't start with if y modulus 2 equals 0, y into 2. No. List comprehension always needs the evaluation or the calculation step first, or the expression first. So evaluate y into 2. Now when will you evaluate y into 2? If y modulus 2 is 0. Otherwise, else you evaluate the expression as just y. Is that clear? So please make a note of this, that if there are if and else conditions, you would be using this method, which is written before the for. Okay, let me just tell you, and that would obviously be our answer. Okay, you can check on it. Suppose your y is 0. 0 modulus 2 is 0. So you multiplied 0 with 2, which is 0. When it's 1, 1 modulus 2 is not 0. So it goes to the else part and stores 1. So can you see when it's 2, all even numbers, it is getting, multiplied by 2. Okay. The other numbers are left as it is. Okay. Now what about a nested list comprehension concept? Nested means what? You have two loops. Okay. Now how do I evaluate this? Now let me just explain to you. What is this expression? So what are you finally planning to store in y? The value of I plus j. Correct? Now what is the range for I? This is the outer loop. This is the inner loop. Let's work this out. So initially, what's the value of I? I is 0. How does a nested loop work? First, you initialize the outer variable. I is 0. That gets into the inner loop. What is the inner loop saying? J is also equal to 0. Okay. So I is 0. J is 0. What are you supposed to be storing in the list? I plus j. I plus j is going to be nothing but 0. Then what have we learned in the nested loop? Do we continue with the j loop or we go to the I loop? We continue with the inner loop, right? So now j becomes 1. So I again evaluate I plus j. So 0 plus 1 is 1. Then j becomes 2. When j becomes 2, I don't continue with the loop, or j in fact doesn't become 2, I could say. Okay, it doesn't become 2 because the range here only says 0 and 1. The range here says 0, 1 and 2. So when you're done with the inner loop, don't you go back and update the outer loop? Yes. So now the outer loop, which was 0, now becomes 1. You get into the inner loop, which is j. J again becomes 0. So I plus j gives me 1. Then j becomes 1. So I plus j gives me 2. I'm done with the inner loop. I go back to update the outer loop. So outer loop now becomes 2, let's say. So then j becomes 0 once again. 2 plus 0 is 2. J becomes 1. 2 plus 1 is 3. I'm done with the inner loop. I go back to the outer loop. Outer loop is also done. So I'm expecting to get this into my list. So the output is 0, 1, 1. 2, 2, 3. Is that clear? So if you had to convert this list comprehension statement into a regular for loop, you would be writing, what would you be writing? You would be creating a list, empty list first. Okay. Then you have your for I loop. Then you have your for j loop. Okay. And what would you be appending to the list y? You would be appending the value of I plus j. Is that clear? So you should be able to convert from a given loop into the list comprehension method. And like I would say once again, this has nothing to do basically with data structures. It was just this topic was added in this section of the syllabus, so we are doing it here. We could have very well done this in the list chapter that we learned in class 11, because this is a feature of the list data type or of Python. Sometimes I told you list is also called a data structure. Is that the reason why the syllabus added it here? No idea. But I hope you understood the concept of list comprehension, and you would be able to do, where you could see it probably in a conversion, where you have to convert from a loop to a list comprehension concept, or probably for output purposes, you would be asked list comprehension. Is that clear? So I hope things are clear. Okay, bye-bye.